Okay, Lassie, I think you can start making introductions now. We're having people join our webinar right now.
Okay. Good afternoon. The Ukrainian-Canadian Congress is very pleased to host Minister Marco Mendicino and Ukraine's ambassador to Canada, Andriy Shevchenko, to discuss the newly established Canada-Ukraine Mobility Working Group. Strengthening people-to-people ties and increasing commercial opportunities between Canada and Ukraine are among the policy priorities for the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress and, of course, for our Ukrainian-Canadian community. Once the difficulties and challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic are overcome, increasing the ease of travel between Canada and Ukraine is a crucial element in strengthening those personal and business ties between our two countries. We are glad to see that Canada and Ukraine aim to finalize a youth mobility agreement, which has been in the works for several years, and will provide youth from both countries with more opportunities to travel. I first encouraged the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress to raise the possibility of a youth mobility agreement between Canada and Ukraine back in 2008 after returning from a conference in Prague, where the Canadian ambassador to the Czech Republic spoke glowingly of the benefits of such agreements. I'm pleased to see that this suggestion made over a decade ago may finally come to fruition. Just as the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement and the EU-Ukraine Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement took effect, we saw a significant increase in travel between EU countries and Ukraine, which of course led to a growth in investment between the EU and Ukraine. And similarly, we hope that the adoption of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement provides such opportunities. We also hope that the Canada-Ukraine Mobility Working Group takes the necessary steps to ease and eventually eliminate visa requirements for Ukrainian citizens traveling to Canada. At the same time, we're hopeful that the Mobility Working Group will serve as further impetus for reform efforts in Ukraine. As we listen to the presentations this afternoon, our audience can type questions into the Q&A or the chat function, and we will answer questions following the presentations. On behalf of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, thank you again, Minister Mendicino and Ambassador Shevchenko, for joining us today. We look forward to your presentations, and I now invite Yvan Baker, Member of Parliament for Etobicoke Centre, to make introductions.
Дякую дуже, Лесю. Thank you very much, Лесю. And hello, шановні пані і панове. Надзвичайно честь мені бути тут з вами сьогодні. It's wonderful for me to be here with all of you who are here observing this webinar, and of course with our special guests for this important conversation. Over the years, I've had a chance to meet with and work with, I'm sure many of you who are watching, certainly I've had the chance to work with the people on the panel, and it's a really special honor for me to be here with all of you today for this webinar with the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, Chyczij, Ambassador Shevchenko, and Minister Marco Mendicino. My role today is to introduce our two guests, and so I will get on with doing that. Marco Mendicino is our Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship. He has a long track record of community engagement that predates his time in elected office. During his first term in office, he championed investments in public transit and affordable housing, and particularly in programs aimed at creating more employment opportunities for young people. Since his appointment as Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, and the appearance of COVID-19, he's focused on bringing newcomers to Canada safely, in great part to drive economic growth and our economic recovery. As many of you know, I am chair of the Canada-Ukraine Parliamentary Friendship Group, which is a group that includes MPs from all parties that works to strengthen our relationship with Ukraine, support Ukraine, and advocate for issues important to the Ukrainian-Canadian community. And as you can imagine, as chair, I have many issues that I would want to advocate on and bring to Minister Mendicino. And the minister has not only listened, but he's worked hard to address those issues that I have raised with him. And that's why I'm excited about today's discussion, so that you can raise the issues that you believe are important with him as well. Minister Mendicino was a friend of our community. He's been a steadfast supporter of not just the community, but I believe of the people of Ukraine at the cabinet table. He's participated in countless events and meetings Holodomor commemorations, for example, Vyshyvanka Day. And if you watch the minister's social media, you'll know that he wears his Vyshyvanka very, very frequently. And I'm very proud of that. And I thank you, Minister, for that. In January, he announced the establishment, of course, of the new Canada-Ukraine Mobility Working Group. And on a personal note, he has been a supporter of mine. When I decided to run for federal office, we had a launch event for my run as a federal member of parliament, and he actually hosted that event. He was kind enough to MC and host that event, so that was a special honor. Ambassador Shevchenko, I will share, many of you know the ambassador well, but I wanted to share some of his accomplishments and experiences. Prior to his diplomatic appointment, Mr. Shevchenko had an accomplished career in politics and media. He is also well known in Ukraine as a civil activist and human rights defender. He won seats in the Ukrainian parliament 3 times, 2006, 2007, and 2012. And he served as the chairman of the Free Speech Committee. And he was the youngest ever, if I'm not mistaken, committee chairman of the Ukrainian parliament, at least at the time. In 2012 to 14, he served as the first deputy chairman of the Human Rights Committee. He's a sponsor of 60 legislative acts adopted by the Ukrainian parliament. That includes the law on access to information, which is a cornerstone of the Ukrainian anti-corruption legislation. And I have to say, 60 legislative acts is a tremendous number, Ambassador. You set the bar high for MPs like myself. And in 2013-14, Mr. Shevchenko was an active participant in Euromaidan and was very involved in organizing peaceful demonstrations and protests. And I have to say on a personal note, he's been a pleasure to work with as we try to strengthen Canada's relationship with Ukraine and see how our two countries can work together, both to support Ukraine and for our mutual benefit as well. So thank you to the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Lesyu, and to your team for organizing this webinar. And thank you, Ambassador, for being here. Minister, thank you for being here to meet with our community leaders. And I'll turn it on over to Minister Mendicino.
Well, good afternoon. Bon après-midi, tout le monde. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Haudenosaunee. And I want to thank my friend and colleague, Yvan, for that very warm and generous introduction. And as you all know, he's not just a great guy, but he's an amazing colleague, a great advocate for the community. He hit all the highlights, but Yvan, I'll tell you, I can't wait to be in person, to wear my Vyshyvanka right alongside you at the next event. Certainly, I'm hoping that'll be in person, but if not, we'll do it virtually again. I always wear it with great pride. And, Yvonne joins a number of colleagues in our caucus, including Minister Freeland, who is a member of the community herself, and who is leading Canada's economic recovery coming out of the pandemic. Just a little bit earlier this afternoon, she announced that she would be tabling the budget on April the 19th, which of course will be the next great chapter in our recovery out of the pandemic so that we can build back better. But most importantly, I know that she is, again, a very, very proud member of the community, and we are proud to call her a friend and colleague. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge my friend, our ambassador to Canada, Andriy Shevchenko. You heard all of the incredible accomplishments from Yvan, but certainly I have enjoyed getting to know Andriy and to work with you and to work with the team and everybody at the embassy who has contributed to some very significant milestones, which I plan to be highlighting today. And of course, thank you to Alexandra and to the Ukrainian Canadian Congress for facilitating this really important discussion today. I also want to say that in the lead up to it, I had the opportunity to do a little bit of homework, a little bit of research. And what really struck me is the way in which you have documented the Ukrainian Canadian community's journey to Canada and the way that it's grown, going right back to the early 20th century, but through some very significant and challenging periods, including through the 2 world wars. And what struck me is the way in which the community has overcome adversity, the way Ukrainian refugees came to Canada, rolled up their sleeves, put their shoulder to the wheel, and help to build a strong country. And it's something that I can relate to as the son of an immigrant family. And certainly as we continue to do this work in public life amidst a very complicated and dynamic environment, ensuring that the people-to-people ties between Canada and Ukraine remain strong is at the very, very core of much of the work that I'm about to highlight. So as you can see, I'm very passionate about this. And let me just say, that in doing this research, I saw that the new comprise the second largest Ukrainian diaspora in the world, right here in Canada. From the farmers who tilled the fields of the prairies to the great one who brought a nation to its feet, it's hard to overstate the contributions of Ukrainian Canadians. Of course, it's always a good time to celebrate Ukrainian Canadians, but 2021 is a particularly fortuitous moment. This year, we celebrate 3 major anniversaries, or to continue the hockey theme, a hat trick. This year marks 130 years since the first Ukrainian immigrants, and that would begin with Yvan Baker and Vasyl Eleniak arrived on our shores. It marks 80 years since the founding of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, and it marks 30 years since Canada became the first Western country to recognize Ukraine's independence. It's a big year, and what better way to celebrate all 3 milestones than to create the next one, which is what brings us here today. Now, on January 27th, I was joined by my Ukrainian colleagues, Dmytro Kuleba, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Arsen Avakov, the Minister of Internal Affairs, to announce the establishment of the Canada-Ukraine Mobility Working Group. This new forum will establish a unique partnership between our governments to help increase mobility, share best practices, and further strengthen cooperation. It will also identify and improve opportunities for Ukrainians seeking to come to Canada once travel restrictions are lifted. Most importantly, it will help Canada and Ukraine work together to finalize a youth mobility agreement, giving young people the opportunity to travel and work in both nations. What better way to bring our peoples together than by giving our youth the opportunity to get to know each other? Our plan is to use the Mobility Working Group to facilitate regular dialogue, to chart out and implement common objectives, and to hold regular meetings. Once we can travel again, hosting will alternate between our 2 countries. In the meantime, I'm pleased to share that the first Mobility Working Group meeting will take place virtually in the next couple of months. Of course, I don't want to talk too much more as I'm looking forward to our discussion today, and of course, hearing the priorities of the UCC and the Ukrainian community more broadly. But before that, I want to take a moment to mention one more thing. As we celebrate the central role that Ukrainian Canadians have played in building in Canada, we must also maintain our resolve in supporting Ukraine's freedom, democracy, and security. It has been a very difficult 7 years of Russian aggression, and our government will always stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of Ukraine. We've shown that through significant financial and material support over the past few years, and we will continue to show it in good times and in bad, because that's what friends do. In conclusion, I want to say thank you again for the invitation today. Canada and Ukraine have a very proud history, but I'm equally excited about the future that we are going to build together. Slava Ukraini! Slava Kanadi!
Thank you, Minister Mendicino. I turn the platform over to Ambassador Shevchenko now.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Ivana, for your very nice introduction words. And Minister Mendicino, that was a very powerful statement, especially when you spoke about this friendship and partnership between us. Thank you so much. I'll just say that it's a great honor to share this screen with all of you. And we are very, very excited about launching the Canada-Ukraine Mobility Working Group. It might sound a little bit boring and bureaucratic, but this will actually have a very important and very practical results. This will help us to build bridges between Canada and Ukraine and remove travel barriers between our nations. And I want to thank Minister Mendicino and the IRCC team on your leadership on this matter. I should be very transparent about this. This initiative came from the Canadian side, and we strongly appreciate this. Taking into consideration that there is a very limited group of countries that Canada has such a group with, we do feel very privileged and very enthusiastic about this initiative. And actually remember meeting with Minister Mendicino early into his ministerial position, and we shared some good laughs talking about European football and about Ukrainian and Italian food and culture. But he became very serious when it came to the conversation about visa-free regime and about mobility matters. And today we can see some good fruits of that very serious and thoughtful approach. And Minister, we do want to see much more to follow on this. I would also like to recognize the work which has been accomplished by the UCC on mobility and visa liberalization. And I believe, Lesiu, the Congress has traveled a long way to embrace this as a very important item on your agenda. In 2019, it was one of the questions that the Ukrainian Canadian Congress sent to all the key parties running for re-election in the parliament, and we received quite impressive results. Actually, all the key parties signaled that they looked favorably at the idea. And this is something that I guess today was expressed by Yvan Baker, who was speaking on behalf of the Canada-Ukraine Friendship Group in the parliament. And I think the UCC and the Ukrainian Canadians, they have made a tremendous job to actually present this issue, not just as an issue of our bilateral international agenda, but as a domestic issue, as an issue of domestic importance, of national importance for Canada. And we strongly appreciate this. Finally, I want to say that we do feel that this mobility working group will help us to see progress on many issues. I think it really creates a new context for our conversations. This, of course, should include the Youth Mobility Agreement. And our big goal is to arrive to visa-free regime one day between Ukraine and Canada, just like Canada has with the United States of America and Mexico, and just like Ukraine has with the European Union. That is exactly why we opened Ukraine for Canadian visitors who now can come to Ukraine without visas. And this is why we are ready to work hard to make sure that we do remove all the barriers for travelers between our two countries. In the pre-COVID times, we witnessed tremendous growth in contacts in all walks of life: business, military, development, tourism. And I do hope we'll see even more of that after the travel restrictions are lifted. So we'd better make the best use out of this time that we have right now. President Chyczij, Minister Mendicino, it's a pleasure to be a part of this very good common cause.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Before I open the floor up to questions, I just want to say that you chose an auspicious day to sign the agreement. January 27th happens to be my birthday, so I know that this is going to result in success. So now I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Ihor Mikhalchishin, to field questions from the audience. Ihor?
Thank you, Lesiu. And we also have Glenn Linder, who's on the line with us from the Department of IRCC, in case there's other questions. He's the Director General for International and Intergovernmental Affairs. So Glenn, you can turn your video on if you're able to, and we'll just, there you go. Great. So we do have, we have a great audience with us today, and we are also being watched on Facebook by another group of people. Unfortunately, those people on Facebook can't send us Q&As, but we will deal with the questions that we have in front of us here. So I believe the panelists can see the questions as well. Some of them are lengthy, so I'll try to sort of summarize them. And just a reminder that we have about 15-20 minutes with the Minister and the Ambassador before they have to head out to their next engagement. So the first question is here. It's when will Canadian officials from IRCC or the embassy, I guess, travel to Ukraine to conduct an assessment mission? The question notes that such a mission was planned in May of 2020. However, it was postponed due to COVID. So again, that's a bit of a COVID-related question. I don't know, Minister or Glenn, if that's something that you can answer.
Well, I'm happy to take the question. And first, once again, let me just say how excited I am to be able to join this panel. And Andriy, I remember that first conversation. We also talked about your namesake, Andriy Shevchenko, who is one of my favorite strikers on the national Ukrainian team, who played for a number of the Italian soccer teams that I follow, including AC Milan. But on to more official matters. We hope to be able to travel as soon as the rules will permit. Obviously, with things being what they are, and the pandemic still requiring health protocols, and I think restrictions which are necessary to reduce the risk of transmission. We don't want to be, I think, too premature out of an abundance of caution. But in the meantime, as I said in my remarks, we're hoping to plan our next summit in the next couple of months. I think that demonstrates a serious commitment and resolve to continue the important and substantive work of advancing the mobility agreement, which will largely be about digging into some of the issues around, how we facilitate travel between our two countries, something that I know Ambassador Shevchenko has raised with me, as well as our government. And so I think that, the community should be well poised to receive updates, because we're going to continue to work in this forum. And I know that next summit meeting, which we will undertake virtually, will continue to yield some very concrete results going forward.
Thank you very much, Minister. And again, feel free, Mr. Linder or Ambassador or any of our other guests to pop in if there's something you needed to add to the questions. Okay, I'm just going to be scrolling down here and rolling through some of the questions we had. Another question that's come up is, again, a little bit more technical about language requirements. So the question is, are the language requirements for immigrants to Canada less stringent if the immigrant, from Ukraine in this case, has been invited to work in a Ukrainian-Canadian setting where language is a requirement, such as a caregiver or other kind of organization? So I know that's a bit of a specific question. I don't know, Minister or Mr. Linder, if that's something you can comment on, perhaps.
Well, we set language requirements to facilitate integration, and we align the requirements based on the occupation that the newcomer is hoping to fill. And what I'll say is that we try to take a fairly uniform and consistent approach to the way we apply language standards across a variety of our lines of service, and that includes, in what we hope will eventually yield a youth mobility agreement. I also just want to say that I often hear from communities about the need for flexibility when it comes to language requirements, and that is an ongoing dialogue. But ultimately, what I see is the real tangible benefit coming out of this forum is the strengthening of economic ties and people-to-people ties between Canada and Ukraine. And what better cohort to focus our energies on than young people who are at the very forefront of their education, their careers. And, for a young Ukrainian coming to Canada, being able to immerse themselves in a community that has a large diaspora, over 1.3 million right across Canada. And you can land in a big city or you can land in rural Canada and still acquire, I think, a tremendous degree of experience, which we hope will allow you to advance your prospects. But I think the other thing that we want to keep in the back of our mind, and I hope my friend Andriy will not mind me saying this, there may very well be a few of those Ukrainians who come to Canada, who are young, who are educated, who possess skills that we will try and entice to stay. And indeed, that has been, I think, one of the enduring qualities about the previous generations of Ukrainians who've come to Canada and who've sought out a better life. So we'll try not to poach too many, but we do know that as part of this agreement, that there is tremendous opportunity for the expansion of skills, experience, and certainly the Canadian experience will lend itself to that.
Excellent, thank you. Next question is from Alexandra. So he notes that Ukraine is a partner country for Canada's MyTax research internship program. In the summer of 2019, 80 Ukrainian university students came to do research internships at Canadian universities. how can this working group help enhance the MyTax research internship program between our two countries, which drives innovation forward in both of our countries? And I believe Ambassador Shevchenko just was saying he can help answer this one too, but Minister, I'll go to you first.
Well, look, I will try to just underscore how enthusiastic I am about our international student program. For two simple reasons. One, because it is a significant economic generator in a typical year, over $21 billion to our economy. But I think, more than that, international students enrich our social fabric. The lived experiences of international students, whether they come from Ukraine or elsewhere, in campus life and in the surrounding economies and communities, is one of the competitive advantages that we enjoy in Canada. And notwithstanding the disruption that has been caused by the pandemic, we've worked very closely with provincial governments as well as the Canadian scholastic institutions themselves to ensure that we could keep that program going. And I'm very happy to report that with a revived corridor last October, we have seen the flow of international students continue, albeit in a safe and orderly fashion. And I know whether it's under the auspices of the MyTax program or whether it's just the broader international student community, I am very keen to ensure that international students are able to come to Canada, to take up their education here, to give back through their contributions to local communities. And I know that my friend Andriy will have hopefully some supportive words on that front as well.
I will, and I'll say that I would like to acknowledge extraordinary work which has been done by the MyTax team and personally by Alexandra Romanko to build this academic, this university connections between Ukraine and Canada. And I should say very clearly that students are those who will greatly or should greatly benefit from work of this mobility working group and from the Youth Mobility Agreement. And we want to make sure that this is a two-way street, because we know that Canada and Canadian universities, they like Ukrainian students. We want to make sure that this works perfectly well in both directions. And we want to make sure that Canadian students who want to spend a semester or two in Ukraine can travel easily to Ukraine. And we want to make sure they have good, easy access to job opportunities in Ukraine during their stay in our country. And as many of you know, this is our second attempt to build these good rules of the game for youth mobility. And first time it did not work for many reasons, because Ukraine was not prepared to match your high standards of treating international students. We want to make sure that this time we do it right. So those are some good lessons that we would like to take from our Canadian friends. And I'm sure now we're in a very good position to really create this very good framework for academic exchanges, and specifically for the internships that you, Alexander, are mentioning.
Great, thank you very much. We've got a couple of questions about COPR holders. So this is a question from, there's a few questions like this I'm just going to merge together. These are people who've had their documents approved, but they've now expired. They may have job offers or contracts, but they're unable to come to Canada because of the COVID pandemic. Wanted to know from our guests what options are available to these people in terms of their situation. And, obviously, I don't know if we can answer that when they'll be allowed to travel to Canada, but maybe if there's some comment on sort of some advice for these people in this situation.
Well, I can take that, Ihor, and I just want to begin by acknowledging that Yvan and I have had some discussions about that, and I know that Yvan Baker, my colleague who's here on the call, has been a real staunch advocate for those newcomers who are trying to navigate the system. Look, there's no doubt that the pandemic has caused significant disruption, but the border measures that we put in place have actually been very effective at reducing the spread of the virus. And in fact, the latest stats demonstrate that only 0.4% of all of Canada's COVID cases stem from international travel. So it really does underline that when you put together a regime that emphasizes advice from healthcare experts, that you can protect Canadians as well as keep corridors open so that you can have safe and orderly immigration. And for those who are abroad, who are currently not able to come to Canada, but who have COPRs in hand, I just want to really emphasize that we have reached out to the vast majority of those COPR holders. We are, in many cases, extending their visas to try and support their future plans to come to Canada when conditions will permit. I would also add that for those who have applied and were approved, they will not have to reapply and start the process over again. So that will be one of the ways in which I think we can mitigate against some of the irritants and the concerns that are being felt by our COPR holders abroad. More importantly, we're going to continue to reunite loved ones with family exemptions. We're going to continue to prioritize spousal sponsorship applications, and we're going to process a record number of applications under the parent and grandparent program, all of which is going to allow us to do record-breaking work when it comes to family reunification as part of our immigration plan. And of course, this is born out of compassion, but it's not just about compassion. We also know that when families are together, that they are also a very compelling and productive economic force to be contended with. So really important question, and I thank the audience for posing it.
Thank you. Okay, again, thank you to everybody who's posting questions. Again, I'm trying to merge some of them together so that we can answer some of the questions together. So the next question relates again to Ukraine, which is since 2017, Ukrainian citizens have had biometric passports and visa-free travel with the European Union. So the question is, what steps will Canada take along the path to removing the temporary visa requirement for Ukrainian citizens, perhaps through the biometric example that's been set with the European Union?
Well, I know this is exactly one of the reasons why we're so excited about setting up this mobility group, which is to examine very carefully how it is that we can strengthen ties through more efficient travel. And we're going to be, as I said, really looking at those issues carefully. In the context of the pandemic, when it comes to biometrics, we've actually waived requirements in some cases where travelers have already submitted biometrics in the past, but that is a temporary and exceptional measure to accommodate for the fact that in many of our foreign offices that there have been closures due to the decisions of those sovereign governments to protect against the pandemic there. So I think that again, I know that Andriy will certainly endorse the idea that this is precisely the kind of issue that was part of the rationale in forming this mobility group, and we are quite enthusiastic to carry on with that work.
Excellent, thank you, Minister. So
I'll just probably add one sentence that we can be impatiently patient on this. We have traveled a long road with our European friends to make sure that we have visa-free regime with the European Union, and we know that nothing can be too complicated for good friends and partners to address.
Excellent, thank you, Ambassador. I think we have time for one last question, and then again, I think this kind of a question will allow all of our guests perhaps to chime in. It's from our good friend Marco Levitsky from Edmonton.
Good name.
Yes, excellent name. Marco Levitsky spells it the same way as you do, Minister. So he has two questions, and he actually works at the Ukrainian New Pathway newspaper. So his questions are, what do you believe are some of the practical results that you think may come from this agreement, and how far are we from the next steps? And so again, that'll be our last question for today. I thank everybody who's submitted questions. We were just not going to be able to get to each one of them. We'll start with you, Minister, and then I'll allow Ambassador and other guests to chime in on those questions again of what do you believe will be the results of the agreement, and how what are the steps needed to move forward?
think that the tangible results and progress that we hope to achieve out of this agreement are an expansion of the economic ties and opportunities that can be enjoyed by the exchange of young people who are looking to broaden their horizons with work abroad in our respective countries. And we know that we live in an increasingly interconnected world where the global economy is very competitive. We see that there is a very practical advantage to creating a forum that will lead to an agreement that will see a more fluid exchange between our two peoples. To that, we would add that we have made great progress in, I think, strengthening our economic ties with the reduction of tariffs between our two countries. Again, I know that's work that my colleague, Minister Freeland and Yvan supported very much. And that out of this, both of our countries will not only accelerate their economic recovery coming out of the pandemic by equipping our peoples with the skills they need to fight it, but most importantly, generate that long-term prosperity. And that's what's so exciting about this, is that we know that, now with a forum that has a focus and a mandate, we can really start to not only examine, but hopefully resolve some of these issues so that we can profit from the very tangible benefits that I just described. And I think with good friends like Andriy and his team, and obviously our two governments and all the officials, that it is certainly within our grasp. And again, that's why it's been such a great opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you, Minister. Ambassador?
Youth mobility agreement is our maybe first goal, or one of the first goals. And I think this group creates a very new environment for that. Second, I would also like if at some point we had a chance to look into the visa refusal rate. And I saw this among the questions asked to us by Irina Matyuk. And it's a very complicated issue. And I'm very thankful to our IRCC friends and to Minister Mendicino for listening carefully to us on this very complicated issue. And also, I think this creates a very new context for our cooperation in some other fields like security, making sure that we can fight crime together, making sure we can fight international crime together. Let's think that mobility is not just about family reunions and wonderful things, but it's also about preventing some not such good things from happening. So I'll just want to say that we are well determined to make this group very efficient, and we will make sure that we work together in a very respectful manner, understanding the complexity of the issues, recognizing the differences that we approach, but with very clear common goal inside. And that goal is to make sure that we remove all the barriers for good communication and good travel between our wonderful nations.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mr. Baker, any comment on that point?
I won't have a lot to add to what the minister said and the ambassador said, but I will say that I just want to underline that two things. One is, for me, I think it's first off, and the minister spoke to this, there's so much opportunity between our two countries to work more closely together, right? Whether that's for economic reasons or for family reunification reasons or for other reasons. Or we had a question from someone about student exchanges through the MyText program, et cetera. There's so much opportunity. And so for me, my hope is that we address a lot of those, that potential, and we address some of those challenges in those categories that allow us to have that economic opportunity, to have that exchange of students, to have those family reunifications that the ambassador alluded to. And secondly, as a member of parliament, I hear from people from all backgrounds who come from all parts of the world, who come to me, who express a desire for improvements, enhancements in how people can travel from various countries and to various countries from Canada. And Ukraine is obviously one of them, because I have a large Ukrainian Canadian community in my riding in Etobicoke Center. And to me, I hope that all that this forms a foundation or an opportunity to address a lot of those things that all those constituents raise with me. So I'm excited about it for that reason, because I think it's the beginning of many great things to come in the future.
Excellent. And I will ask Alexandra Chyczij, UCC's president, to wrap up their closing remarks.
Thank you, Ihor. Thank you, Minister Mendicino and Ambassador Shevchenko, for your participation in today's forum. And thank you also, Yvan Baker and Glenn Linder. We've heard again today that the ties between Canada and Ukraine go far beyond those of just friendship and family that many of us have. Ukrainians and Canadians are bound together by the fundamental principle that all people have the right to self-determination, to liberty, and to peace. And that is why Canadian support for Ukraine has never been a partisan issue in Canada. Our support and commitment is based on something far more important than politics. It's based on a shared humanity. And it's in that spirit that the UCC will continue to work to represent our community and to grow the already strong ties between Canada and Ukraine. Thank you. Дякую. I look forward to seeing our panelists and members of our audience in person as soon as it is safe to do so. Be safe.
Thank you, everyone.